Hello, and we are back live on LinkedIn and Facebook. And today I have a really impressive guest, really flavor of the moment issue around the whole area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And her name is Furkan Karyal. Furkan, how are you? It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well, Simon. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. And, you've just released a book, which we're going to talk about in a second, which I think is just an amazing concept around the book. But first of all, you're a multi-award winning diversity and inclusion speaker. The book is called Inclusive Intelligence, and I can see some copies behind you. My copy is on the way, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Inclusive Intelligence, how to be a role model for diversity and inclusion in the workplace, which is so important right now. And you lecture at the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Master's Program at Dun Laoghaire Institute of Art, Design and Technology here in Ireland. Your passion is leveraging women in tech leadership, diversity, and empowering female founders globally. Your company is diversin.com. You've spent 10 years being a software engineer. You've been honored with Speaker of the Year, Diversity Inclusion Role Model in Business, and much more. I can go on, but Furkan, I'd rather you spoke than me. Maybe just tell us a little bit about you and how you got to do what you're doing now.
Thank you so much, Simon, first of all, for the introduction, lovely introduction. And hello and welcome, everyone. So about myself, you touched into very good points. So after working for 10 big years as a software engineer, I made a huge transition in my career. And I started Diversin. And there were many reasons for that, but I'm going to tell 3 reasons. The first reason was not able to see women who look like me in the leadership positions of big tech companies. Working in tech was my dream. And I got in there and I was super happy. I thought, that is maybe the it. And maybe that's end of my story. Maybe I will, retire from this. And I always had that security in mind that this is going to be, end of my story. But actually, this was the beginning of the story. So the second biggest reason was diversity, inclusion, belonging. These words being used a lot as a marketing tool overall by big organizations, but the action piece was always missing. I've seen it myself. I've observed these things. And the last but not the least reason was my manager. She basically didn't know how to deal with me. Even though I could be nominated to be one of the easiest going team member in the team, but again, she didn't know how to deal with me. So these issues are not only limited to one workplace, one society, one country, but it's what I've experienced that these are actually global issues. And the action piece is really missing. People are, even though they have good intentions, they just have no idea where to start. And the miscommunication issues, the fear of being misunderstood. So these things all hold people back to understand each other, to communicate clearly, so that it becomes an issue later on. So while we are waiting to get the best out of an employee's performance, and then these are not happening. So I started Diversin with the vision to make Diversin the go-to place for diversity and inclusion trainings, education resources, events, and so on in Ireland and globally. So since then, I also lecture, as you said, in Dun Laoghaire IT on the master's program, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And recently, I published my book, Inclusive Intelligence, with my learnings in the society, in the workplaces, on what were the missing action points that people can easily implement on their day-to-day activities and agendas. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, that's impressive, and so many points. At every word, I could have stopped you and intervened, and because I've had a similar journey. I've traveled around the world and I've been blessed. I've worked with Aboriginal communities in Australia, Indigenous communities. I've done a lot of things. And as you say, it's very easy to say things, but following through with your intention and truly connecting with people intentionally is what just seems to miss. It just seems to miss the mark in most companies. And this is not because of any necessarily malicious or negative intent. It's just, I think, as you said, unless leaders, and I'm particularly interested in leadership, unless leaders are very, very intentional and reinforce these issues, they're going to fall off the agenda. And so I'm really interested in the book. Inclusive intelligence, I think, is a genius name for the book. And for me, it all starts with the mindset of a leader, and then the behaviors in organizations and attitudes. So maybe tell us a little bit more about how you tackled this subject. How did you structure the book? How did it come about, and how have you structured it?
Yeah. First of all, I did interviews with many leaders from different parts of the world, global leaders in different sectors. So what I have seen that inclusive leaders had 6 skills in common. And if you ask them, could you describe what inclusive leadership is? They probably wouldn't be able to describe it or define it, but they were naturally so good at it. So the common skills were, first of all, was self-awareness. And the second, empathy, like in emotional intelligence as well. Empathy, engagement, cultural wisdom, accountability, and commitment. So these were the 6 skills. And the book has 6 chapters, and each of them is talking about this topic and talking about the insights in the current workplaces. What is the engagement rate overall, for example, or how leaders are missing the opportunity to learn about culture and what kind of what they are missing without having those cultural intelligence. It's interesting. For example, we asked in diverse and social media that how familiar your leader is, how your leader is familiar with your background culture, and 78% of them said they have no idea about it. So it's like you don't even invest time into understanding one person truly, and then you're expecting the best out of that employee's performance. It's just very selfish, which is not inclusive at all. So why would somebody, without being feeling to be understood, to be valued, why would they give their whole self to work? So it just doesn't make any sense. So the structure of the book came together like this. And it's interesting, I started to write the book just before the pandemic in January 2020, on the way on the flight from London Heathrow to Dallas, Texas. And the structure and everything, the jet lag helped me for sure. I used to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and until the breakfast was opening at 6:30, I used to write one chapter, the structure, what I wanted to include. So 80% of the book actually came from my jet lag times, early morning. And it's how it shaped into. And also I included some examples from my own experiences working in different organizations, and as well as what I have observed during these times.
Wow. And you're right. I mean, those 6 subjects are so important. But for me, really, that whole area of self-awareness is so important. I mean, we all have, we all have biases. Every single race, color, culture, creed, we all have biases, and we all have stereotypes. And the issue for me, though, is what you do with those biases and stereotypes. And when I was CEO for an indigenous organization in Australia, and I was privileged to be, I remember saying, in a kind of self-centered way, looking back, I was self-centered. I remember saying to the Aboriginal chairman, I feel a bit guilty in this role. And she turned around to me and she said, well, don't you think we deserve the best CEO regardless of color? And I hadn't thought of it that way. And that really demonstrated to me the bias that I had, and that for me to even say that was an inbuilt bias. And so I learned at that stage that we really need to have a way of checking ourselves. What do you think about that? How do people go around checking themselves before they do the wrong thing, or to maximize their inclusive mindset? How do we check ourselves?
Yeah, there are many tools actually people can find online. Harvard implicit bias test is one of the things I always invite leaders to take. It has different groups, so you can take the test against gender or race or different groups. So let me give you one example while we talk about our own biases. So for such a long time, I thought that I might have a bias against a group, and I was trying to be mindful of that, and I didn't get a chance to take the test as well. And so I start growing that I might have a bias. So be careful, in your actions, Furkan. And then I took the test, and turns out I have a favor towards that group. So
that's a positive bias.
Yes, positive bias. So because of I ingrained that thought in myself a lot, so it turned it into a favor, which is not inclusive either. So I hear 9 out of 10 leaders, when they take the test, they always get a surprising results like I got, for example. So, tools like this help us to understand. And on the other side, I have so many different ways to introduce. If we have if we have an inclusive language, if we have our own biases, I ask, for example, is this email or is this behavior respectful? Is this empathetic? Is this courageous? Because we need that courage as well. Why? Because there will be some inequality in the email thread, more maybe in the meeting. So we need to have that courage to be an ally, to stand out what is actually wrong. So these 3 things I always as, is it empathetic, is it respectful, is it courageous? So maybe asking simple questions like this can remind ourselves.
That's a great point. It's funny because I've always had courage. I as far as I can remember as childhood, I've always disliked injustice, and I've always disliked prejudice. I had an innate dislike of it. And so, but I would often speak out in my earlier career when I saw something going wrong. I remember I spoke out when a young female lawyer in Australia was being treated not in the right way. But what I was missing was self-awareness. So I basically got the blame for it, right? And so you do need to balance. You have to, that doesn't mean to be a coward and not say it, but I think you need to have the self-awareness around how to call it and how to say it to be constructive and helpful. Do you agree with that? Sometimes you can say it and actually damage both parties. How do people balance courage and self-awareness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always give this message that, give positive energy and you receive positive energy. So even though if the things that you would like to see it changed, first of all, we need to, do it. We need to be a good example. And then another thing is having a clear okay and not okay list. And without most of the communication issues are having that people are not clear. People are not, the ambiguity is just something that people, for example, if that if you drive on the red light, if you know that you are going to be getting a fine, then you don't do it. So because it's clear, it's a rule, everyone knows. So having that not okay, behaviors, let's say, making it clear, everyone knows about it, people can see that visible, that it's living values, it makes it easier for for people to implement that rather than being angry. There's so many things that we can agree with or disagree with, and that's not the point. That's not to put the situations against a person or against a behavior against a person. So which is completely not the aim. It's about learning what is okay and what is not okay, and it's all a process of learning. I mentioned it in the book as well. It's a learning process. Inclusive intelligence is a journey, but the sooner you begin, the further you will go. Rather than being afraid of, communicating or saying, people understand intentions. It's just easy when you look at the face. Oh, this intention was actually good.
I agree.
Put that intention, and then the things will happen.
I agree. It's really interesting. It's also about that communication connection thing, because I was talking to a guy from Italy, Fausto Turco, who is an academic and a consultant, a couple of weeks ago, and he had an interpreter there. I don't speak Italian. He doesn't really speak English, and yet I posted afterwards, there's an image of the three of us laughing, right? And we were really communicating on the same frequency, and yet we weren't talking the same language. And so I think we can communicate. It's about connection, isn't it? It's about the intent. It's about the human feeling of connection. That's the first thing. The other thing I heard recently around, a lot of people say, well, what's the threshold? How do you know you've overstepped the mark into being discriminatory or into being racist or whatever? And I heard recently, in the context of football crowds, right, and the chants in football stadiums, and somebody was saying, a pundit was saying that in his mind, the demarcation for him, and I'll be interested in what you think, is if you said, Simon, you're going bald, that's unpleasant, because that's intentionally, that would hurt somebody. But if you said, and there's nothing I can do about it, right? But if you said, Simon, you've got funny colored glasses, I could change the color of my glasses. And so this person said that wouldn't be negative, but talking about a person attribute. But then I'm thinking, well, in certain cultures, and I'm talking to you, Furkan, you can't just change your clothes, so you have to be. So how do you draw the line around this stuff?
So you mean, how do you draw if it is acceptable and not acceptable?
Correct. How do you know?
Well, it really depends on the person that you are dealing with.
Yeah, which is awareness. It's awareness. It's
cultural
awareness.
Yeah, it's like, to me, you don't, like, for example, you are talking to another person. So it is not up to me to decide what is acceptable for another person. So it is really in that communication level. If they feel happy about it, I think there is no problem. If they feel that they are undervalued or offended, that means there's something to be done there.
Yeah. And do you think there's a responsibility on the person to whom the comment is made, for them to be forthright and say, well, I don't really mind, but going forward, maybe you should be more careful with others? Do you think there's a responsibility on both sides?
I always agree that there is a responsibility on both sides, because at the end of the day, let's say if you get offended by one comment, if you keep silent about it, the chances are the other person will do it again, and without maybe understanding that wasn't an okay situation. So it's both ways. And but again, if you balance the intentions, if you see both of them are in the good intentions, things improve much in an easier way. And there are tons of different type of cultures, different type of personalities. The chances are you will find people who will be offended or who will not feel okay from something that we present a behavior. So let's accept this, that things will go wrong sometime. Without our control. And making that good intention that we are here to learn, we are here to improve, and we are here to make that communication stronger and better next time, and being open to discussions.
I think that's a really good point. And how long did it take you to write the book?
Yeah, it took me 3 months to write it.
That's very quick. The quickest I've ever written is 9 months, 3 months. How did you do it in 3 months?
Seriously? Wow, that's my first book. So jet lag definitely helped me. On the other side, I knew what I was going to write. So the structure was just like, I knew the structure.
Yeah.
And I'm a critical reader. So even before that, years ago, I have a list of maybe 50 items that what makes a book good to me. So I took that as a reference. I have a look at each of them. Can I implement this on my book as well? So it was, I had a guidance on that. And it took me more than a year to find a publisher. So that was the most difficult part.
That's the hardest part, yeah. No, I agree. And what was your favorite part of the whole process?
The favorite part, I can say, is the satisfaction of seeing that, this story or this learning, this piece doesn't only stay with me. It reaches out to the world. It is a lesson to be learned not only by me, but people around me. But actually, when I'm maybe doing something else at home, people will read it, people will learn from it as well. And maybe people will enjoy or start implementing some of the steps that I mentioned. So it's just so magical. I start getting pictures from different parts of the world that they share when they got the book and with their hand. And even at the train from Valencia to Madrid, there was a picture they were holding on their hand. And it's just different story from different part of the world. It just makes me feel like, okay, I completed a mission here, but I should keep going and keep spreading the message. So
I agree. I mean, it's like you're leaving a legacy. I honestly think each of those 6 sections, I don't want to put pressure on, but you could write another book on each of those 6 sections, and really drill deeper into each, and so the most important question is how do people order the book, and first of all order the book, and how do they connect with you?
Sure. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. And on other social media channels as well. The book is available in Kindle and paperback versions on most of Amazon pages. And we have a hub called inclusiveintelligence.org. So in there, you will find the link to Amazon. You will find a link to where can you order a signed copy, where can you download the free printables from the book, some of the synopsis from the book, or download inclusively. There is a journal. So it's a hub. You can find everything in there, inclusiveintelligence.org.
That's wonderful. Furkan, you're a real inspiration. I first spoke to you about a year ago, and I didn't know you were writing the book, but I have a knack of seeing when people are on a journey of growth, and I can see you are. And being on a journey of growth is actually helping others to grow. So well done. It's great work you're doing, and you're creating an amazing legacy. And I'm sure that this won't be the last book. There'll be more books in you. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Simon, and especially great to hear this from you. And thank you so much. I'm really delighted to do this every day, which just inspires me as well and for my growth. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye, everybody.